What's going on, all you wonderful A-Plusters out there? It is I, Stuart, here once again with another review for you guys, this time on Star Trek Strange New Worlds Season 2, Episode number 4. And if you're wondering about the frame rate, I believe I mentioned it in my previous video. I don't know why there's a frame rate issue going on right now with OBS. Unfortunately, I can't seem to fix the issue, so we're stuck with the really bad frame rate. I apologize. But that all being said, you're not here to listen to me talk about my frame rate. You're here to listen to me talk about Star Trek Strange New Worlds. And the episode starts off with the Enterprise investigating a planet or move or something near Vulcan, believed to be home of some intelligent beings not yet discovered. Now, the reason I wasn't sure to say planet or moon is because when I went to look up information about this episode, specifically, I wanted to know if there were any Easter eggs that may have gone over my head, or if this planet in general had been mentioned in Star Trek lore before. I couldn't find anything. The only thing I could find is that there is technically debate on whether or not there are moons on Vulcan, because in Star Trek the original series it was said that there are no moons on Vulcan, but then when it came to the first motion picture movie, we clearly see moons in the background that were later removed in the special edition of the movie, I guess. Again, this is all just for me looking up, and this was all because I was trying to see if the world they were visiting had been mentioned before, because I didn't bring it up. I believe which episode was it? There was something, I believe, it was the previous episode when they were on the planet that makes you forget things. I didn't realize that was a planet from the original series, so I wanted to make sure I wasn't making that same mistake, and it left me down this rabbit hole just on people debating whether or not Vulcan has moons. So I'm going to assume this was a neighboring planet, not a moon, just to simplify things basically, but it's home to these intelligent beings that have not yet been discovered, like I mentioned before, but these are beings that live in an alternate dimension and don't really have a physical form. So when Spock and Nurse Chapel take a shuttle down to examine, they're basically in a shuttle crash, and we don't see much from Spock's point of view because he's passed out after the crash, but then he wakes up, and at first, it's a POV shot, so we know something is going to go wrong. You always know when it's a POV shot and someone wakes up in the hospital, there's going to be a reveal, and it's going to be something you don't expect. Although, I already saw the preview for this episode before, so obviously I knew what the reveal was going to be, but regardless, we find out that the beam has, or whatever it was that caused the crash, the beings on the planet that live in that other dimension, they were able to fix Spock, but they weren't able to fix him correctly. All they had to go on was basically Nurse Chapel's DNA, and they figured because he was part human, it must be similar enough, so that's how they reconstructed him. They took away all the Vulcan out of Spock and made him pure human. And this is bad enough as it is, right? But on top of this, there's a, I don't know what to call it. They had a name for it in the episode, and of course, because I'm a moron, I didn't write it down. But basically, there is a pre-wedding dinner that T'Pring's parents have been insisting on, having for a while, and it's at the point where Spock can no longer really blow it off. So, basically, in order to have kind of some neutral ground between the two, they agreed to do it on the Enterprise in return that, they do it soon. So Spock has to prepare for this family dinner as a human, which is from everything that we see in this episode. Like this type of family dinner would be frustrating as a Vulcan. So you can only imagine how hard it must be for someone like Spock, who is now human, experiencing human-like emotions for the first time. Now, they do go out of their way to make sure there's not a continuity error in the sense of it being mentioned that Spock himself does have emotions. Vulcans themselves do have emotions. They just choose to repress them. They are able to, but they make it very clear in this episode, so they're not trying to say that this is Spock's first time having emotions, but it's the first time having the emotions but in a human body. So us humans, we don't naturally repress emotions the same way Vulcans do. So for him in a human body, it's a lot more challenging. So I'm sure there's going to be nerds out there that are still going to probably call this a continuity error, and maybe it is. I don't see it that way. I think they really went out of their way to make sure it wasn't a continuity error. But yeah, it made sense to me is what I'm saying. So you basically have Spock dealing with these human emotions the same way a teenager does. He really just, doesn't know how to fit in at the moment, doesn't know when it's appropriate to laugh, or when it's appropriate, when you're laughing too much, basically. And doesn't exactly know how to talk about his emotions either, because it leads to awkward moments, a couple of which that actually will give you a good chuckle, but it'll be that kind of purposefully cringe type of chuckle. So, it'll make you cringe, but it's part of the comedy, So, a lot of shenanigans as Spock has to basically learn how to control his emotions properly, and Amanda comes on board to help him. Yes, he gets help from his human mother of how to deal with Vulcan emotions as a human, and it's here we get some really awesome insights, about Amanda as a person. So, one thing that was really interesting is one of the traditions in the ceremony is that you have to basically lift a hot kettle of tea and pour it into a cup. Now, this is a hot kettle of tea. This isn't just like, one that, has padding that doesn't get heated somehow, but no, full on. He has to pour it in without burning and, without showing any sign of pain as a human. And it's hard to do because, like, the moment he touches it, you can hear his hands searing on it. You can, just see with how fast he moves his hands away that it is not comfortable to touch. But then you get his mother doing it, and she does it, the same way you would see from a Vulcan. And it's really impressive. This episode really does a good job of pointing out how much Amanda really did have to sacrifice in terms of her overall just humanity in order to just live on Vulcan. It has been brought up in the past, but never in a detailed way like this episode, at least not that I know of. So it was a really cool moment of Spock learning from his mother. So while this is going on, Nurse Chapel is expecting an interview to basically attend the Vulcan Science Academy, something that had been set up in previous episodes, something that I thought was set up to lead to her departure so that they could introduce Dr. McCoy later on down the line. But that doesn't appear to be the case because she doesn't get in. And even at the end of the episode, when she, it seems like she has a moment where she could really win the Vulcans over. I really love it. She chooses not to. She just kind of goes, you know what? If you're going to judge people like the way that you do, and the way they did it during the interview, they were really fast about just dismissing her right from the get-go. So, she brings up the fact that if they're not ready to deal with students that have a lot of potential, but they don't want to have to work with them to get to that potential, then it's the school that's just not ready for them. It's not that she's not ready for the school, it's that the school isn't ready for her. I loved that line. The way she said it with so much confidence was awesome. Basically, in the most polite way, she basically told the ambassador to shove it. I love it. So there's also her during this side plot. She's also trying to help get the cure for Spock by going back to the planet where those beings are at, and tries to negotiate with them in order to help them return him. One of the things I really like is that Spock is a lot more open with his human emotions, which she likes, but she also understands that it's not the reason that she loves Spock. So just the Spock that she knows is just no longer there, and that's partially her motivation of wanting to help him. It's also the fact that she feels guilty because later on we find out that Spock basically powered down all of his shields in order to divert all power to her in order to make sure she survived the crash. So she eventually does get the cure, but unfortunately it's a little too late in with the dinner. Basically the entire dinner is commencing, and they're doing all their traditions, doing a really good job of it. But holy crap, is T'Pring's mom a horrible, horrible human being. And by human being, of course, I mean Vulcan. She is a horrible, horrible Vulcan in this. Basically criticizing Spock any moment that she gets. And not to mention, you even have Pike being nice enough to help prepare a meal for them, using all sorts of Vulcan recipes. And then they can't help but, give them props for the effort. No, they can't do that. No, they have to criticize criticize his cooking, basically calling it mediocre. Even when he's being very intelligent about the way he cooked, because they mention how traditionally on their planet it's cooked a certain way, but then he brings up the fact that the atmosphere on the Enterprise is a bit different. So they end up having to, he ended up having to season it differently than is traditionally done on Vulcan. And one thing I thought was so funny about the scene, though, was that her dad was clearly not like a horrible person, because he actually was kind of complimenting him and only stopped complimenting when the wife looked really annoyed at him. So it was definitely a kind of funny, if not slightly depressing dynamic right there, because that's also like what a good chunk of the night kind of was. There's also a gag about them learning charades, but the real amazing thing that happens in this episode happens when there is a tradition during this dinner where for 3 minutes straight the mother just gets to I guess just really talk down to you, to mention all the things about you that they don't like. And you have this with Spock, and it starts out very childish, very much like the stuff that you would typically expect from a mother-in-law, but then it gets worse and worse, and then suddenly she says things that you really can't take back, and things that any normal person would tell the other person to go screw themselves over. But Spock really wants this to go well, and he's willing to repress his emotions as a human, his newly found emotions, which can't possibly be easy for him at all. And eventually leads to him needing a moment by himself so he can really let out the anger that that she just like kind of built inside of him. Just, oh my gosh, it was a hard moment to watch, and the actor playing Spock just did a brilliant job of just playing a character who's clearly pissed off but is trying so hard not to look like he's pissed off. He pulls off that look on his face just so extremely well, and it was a great moment. But luckily Nurse Chapel arrives just in time for the mind meld part of the ceremony, so because that's like one thing you really can't fake as a Vulcan is your ability to mind meld. So he has his biology back, but he does still have the human ears, which I was like wondering for a minute. I wonder why that is. Why they didn't bother to give the ears back if everything else is working. So we get the mind meld scene, and it's a very beautiful moment where it turns out that she was remembering, because it's between Spock and his mother, the mind meld, and his mother was remembering a time when Spock was just a child. And one thing that we learn a little bit later on in the episode almost kind of gave me a teary eye. It was the reason she remembered it was because it was the first time Spock was accepted by other Vulcans, something that she rarely gets to experience like herself. Of course, being a human married to a Vulcan on planet Vulcan, like it's definitely not easy. And so when she saw that Spock finally found other Vulcans that he was getting along with, that was like the moment she remembered most, and that was the moment that made her the happiest with Spock, which I thought was just such an incredibly sweet moment, and it led to Spock, of course, acknowledging how much her mother had to go through in order to just live on Vulcan. Again, the Spock and Amanda moments in this episode were just absolutely amazing. Both actors do an incredible job, of course. But then we finally have my favorite moment in the episode, which is, of course, the mother trying to claim that Spock was able to pull this off despite his human disadvantage, and then claiming after that that no human could possibly have done what Spock just did. And that's when I love it. Spock removes the prosthetic ears and reveals that he's been human the whole time. Such an awesome moment. Such a great, again, in the most Vulcan way you can possibly say it, a great way to say, go screw yourself. Great episode overall. And I do love how, like, as the parents are leaving the door, you even have the dad kind of like looking at Pike and asking for more of the Vulcan snacks that he made for them earlier. Hilarious. Very, very great. This was a really awesome episode again. Really loved everything about it. Almost forgot to mention the final part between Spock and Nurse Chapel. So because originally Spock was supposed to bring in on the plans, but he didn't, and this really upset her because it kind of understandably makes her feel like Spock doesn't trust her. And I will say that, like, I could kind of see both sides in this situation. I get why Spock didn't do it, and I get why she doesn't doesn't feel like he didn't do it for the right reasons, if that makes sense. Spock doing it in order to not put too much pressure on her when there already is a lot of pressure on her. I feel like that's the main reason. And also, of course, her being a Vulcan and not being able to lie was also like a big part of that reason. So it made sense why he didn't want to, bring her in on the planet. It just would have added too much stress. But I can see how if you're about to marry someone and something really big like that happens, like they turn human on you and they don't tell you that, I think you got a little right to be upset about that, honestly. So her breaking up with Spock, or not necessarily breaking up, but saying that they need some time apart, made total sense to me. And boy, does Spock move on fast, because the kind of relationship that has kind of been building up between him and Nurse Chapel finally, comes into full effect as the two of them do kiss. And it seems like they are now a couple at the end of the episode. But overall, guys, really great episode, like I said before. From the acting, from the writing, from just the amazing dialogue in this episode, I think everything about this episode just worked very well. Solid A. Another A episode, definitely, undoubtedly. But of course, guys, at the end of the day, those are just my A+ opinions. We here at A+ Opinions always want to know what you guys think, so definitely let me know your thoughts on this episode in the comments down below. Don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe to our channel, but of course, guys, above all, don't forget to keep it A+, and I will talk to you all later. Goodbye.